At dawn, still wrinkled under the weight of the new day, Pope Leo XIV stopped before the formation of Swiss guards. But when his eyes met ours, I saw something the cameras couldn't capture. A man carrying the weight of 2,000 years of history, seeking strength from those who will now become his shield. The room held its breath at the gesture that broke all the rules in the first hours of the pontificate. I still get goosebumps remembering that moment. Just 3 hours ago, the whole world saw him on the balcony of the basilica. And while the streets of Rome were still bustling with cheers inside the Vatican, we were living a moment that no camera could capture. The messenger ran almost out of breath. The Holy Father wants to meet the entire guard right now. This is not within the rules. He stressed that it had to be immediate. We looked at each other confused. In 17 years of protecting these sacred walls, I have never seen anything like it. A newly elected pope would normally rest, pray, or prepare for the busy days ahead rather than call such a surprise meeting. "Are you sure?" our commander asked. "You said yourself, before today is over, we need to see all of them." The messenger replied. A chill ran down my spine. Something important is definitely about to happen. The Clementina room glows under the golden Roman sunset. Sunlight filters through the tall windows, illuminating frescoes that have witnessed centuries of history. The scent of newly lit candles mingled with the lingering scent of incense from this morning's ritual. We lined up in silence. The veterans stood in front with the dignity that only years of service can bring. Next came the regular guards, who had served for several years, and behind them came the new recruits, some of whom had just arrived from Switzerland. Today is the first day of defending a new pope. I could feel the tension in the air not only because of the solemnity of the moment, but also because of the uncertainty. What does the Pope want to tell us that is so urgent? My mind suddenly recalled the previous transition when the humble Pope Francisco surprised the world. But this time is different. This is an American who was a missionary in Latin America, this morning Cardinal Prevost, now bearing the name Leo XIV. A name heavy with history. The door opened with a solemn sound, and he appeared. The first thing that struck me was his loneliness. He entered alone, without a ceremonial entourage. A man in a white shirt walked steadily but tiredly. His face was marked by emotion and exhaustion. This man must not have slept. Perhaps he hasn't eaten anything either. His whole world was turned upside down in just a few hours. But instead of resting, he came to see us. I noticed his slightly rapid breathing, the anxious blinking of his eyes, and the way his hands tightened on the papal ring he was still not used to wearing. Those little details reveal his true self under the weight of a sacred responsibility. "My beloved children," he began. His voice had a slight accent that was a blend of his American roots and his years in Peru. His voice was warm and sincere, like a father talking to his family. "I want to see you before this day ends, because I need to look into the eyes of those who from this moment on will accompany me in the mission that God has placed in my hands." He paused for a moment. I saw him take a deep breath as if searching for more air and swallow with difficulty. This is not a prepared speech, but the heart of a human being speaking from the fragility of the first day. "Until this morning," he continued, his voice trembling slightly as he mentioned the name of the children who defended Francis, a holy man who taught us the meaning of humility and service. "Now, according to God's will, which I still find difficult to understand, you will protect me." And then the unexpected happened. The Pope took 2 steps forward, left the ceremonial position, and came straight towards us. I could see his eyes clearly, tired but filled with a quiet determination. "I have not come here to speak to you as a head of state or a supreme pope," he said, his voice suddenly becoming strangely familiar. "I come because today, when choosing the title Leo, I remember something that cannot be overlooked." His eyes swept over the rows of guards. The young guards always remained motionless, now cannot hide surprise at this unexpected closeness. Cleo XIII, after whom we are partly named, had a vision that led her to compose a prayer that was said at the end of every Mass for decades to protect the Church during dark times. He stopped and looked straight at us, as if he wanted us to understand the depth of what he was about to say. A prayer that today, in this historic moment when faith is under attack more fiercely than ever, we feel we must restore together. The room was filled with a silence that was almost palpable. No one moved. Even veteran guards accustomed to the presence of popes seemed shaken by this display of vulnerability. Just 2 hours earlier, the Pope said, and I noticed his chest heaving with irregular breathing. When we stepped out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, we felt the weight of history on our shoulders. We saw the faces of thousands of people waiting for a message of hope. He paused, running his hand over his forehead, as if he were reliving the moment before us. I told them what I now want to repeat to you. Do not be afraid to proclaim the good news. I have said it twice because it is the message that the world needs today more than ever. His eyes swept across the room, and his voice suddenly rose with unexpected force. And do you know why we are afraid? The evangelizer today is to go against the tide, to defend truth in the midst of chaos dressed in tolerance, to speak of sacrifice in a world that wants comfort. I saw his hands, which had been trembling before, now clenched into fists on his chest. We are afraid because to be Catholic today is to accept the cross, to face ridicule at the university, to be called backward in the workplace, to be marginalized in the culture, to be judged by people who have never read a page of the gospel. These words fell like stones on a still lake, creating visible ripples on the faces of the young guards. As Jesus said in the Gospel of St. Diana, chapter 15:20, "If they persecuted me, they will persecute me also." My children, following Christ means walking the path he took, the path that led to Calvary before the glory of the resurrection. I will confess something to you, the Pope said. He lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. His gaze became more intense, and I saw a small vein throbbing gently on his forehead. Back in the chapel, in the most tense moment of the conclave, I was afraid. These words stunned me. A pope on his first day admitting his fear of man before those who should look to him as a symbol of inviolable authority. Not fear of responsibility, but fear of a world that is moving further and further away from God. A world where technology advances, but love recedes. Where we have many connections, but lack communion. Where we build skyscrapers while families fall apart. He looked up, and I saw his eyes sparkle with suppressed emotion. Francis once told me, "Robert, the world does not need a perfect pope. The world needs a pope who is not afraid to kneel before God and to kneel before those who suffer." Those words sustained me when the votes piled up and the weight began to weigh on my shoulders. His voice broke when he mentioned Francis, and he had to pause to regain his composure. It was clear that every second of connection between the two was deep, and the pain of losing him was still fresh in his heart. And then Pope Leo XIV continued to discreetly shed a tear. I remember the prayer to Archangel Michael, the prayer that our predecessor Pope Leo XIII composed after a vision of the dangers that beset the Church. He looked at our ceremonial halberds, weapons that have symbolized the physical protection of the Pope over the centuries. His son said, pointing to them carrying these weapons to protect us physically, "But today I want us to take up together a much more powerful spiritual weapon." And then, to the amazement of all, Pope Leo XIV closed his eyes, bowed his head slightly, and began to read. "Archangel Michael, protect us in battle." He read in Spanish, the language he used during his many years of missionary work in Peru, a language familiar to many of the faithful. His voice, which had been hesitant before, now rang out firmly and clearly, as if each word were a declaration of war against invisible forces that threatened the Church. "Please protect us from the evil and schemes of the devil." A chill ran down my spine. Beside me I saw several young guards visibly moved. Even the usually tough veterans showed a suppressed emotion in their eyes. He continued in Italian so that we all understood clearly. "We humbly ask you, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, please drive Satan and other evil spirits who are walking in the world seeking to destroy souls into hell." When he finished, he repeated it in Spanish so everyone could understand. When the prayer ended, the silence lasted for a few more seconds. It seemed that we all understood the profound meaning of what had just happened. The new pope has drawn us into a spiritual battle in his first hours, far beyond the Vatican walls. This prayer, the Pope said, to catch our breath is not just an ancient tradition. It is a declaration of war that we are in a spiritual war, a war for souls. His eyes burned with a new fire, in contrast to the obvious physical exhaustion. Today we face enemies that Pope Leo XIII could not have imagined. A world where human life is taken for granted from the womb to old age. Where the truth called intolerance and lies are clothed in freedom. Where virtual walls are erected to isolate people, while the moral walls that once protected them are torn down. He took a few steps closer to us. Our young people are suffering from an epidemic of loneliness and despair, trapped between screens that promise connection but deliver nothing. Our families are falling apart under the weight of a culture that glorifies the temporary and discards the permanent. I saw the young guards nod slightly, as if they, who had grown up in the digital age, understood what he said. And we Catholics, he continued, his voice trembling with emotion, often remain silent. We fear being excluded, criticized, labeled. We are afraid to stand up for what we know to be true. When he mentioned Francis, his voice softened and his eyes sparkled as if he were holding back tears. Pope Francis understood this well. He once told me, "Robert, that today the Church needs witnesses, not teachers." He took a deep breath as if trying to contain his emotions as he remembered the Pope who had passed away not long ago. Pope Francis teaches us not to be afraid to get our hands dirty with human suffering, that the shepherd must carry the smell of the sheep. He paused, gently wiping his eyes discreetly. The last time we spoke, just days before he passed away, he continued, and I saw his Adam's apple move as he swallowed with difficulty. He took my hand and said, "If one day you have to carry this cross, remember that you do not carry it alone. How many people are there with you who dare to follow Christ in a world that rejects him?" Those words seemed to give him strength. His posture changed subtly, as if the memory of Francis was supporting him. So today when I stepped out onto the balcony, I repeated it twice. Do not be afraid to proclaim the good news. That is the legacy we want to continue. A church that does not shy away from, or apologize for, its faith. A church that loves unconditionally, but always speaks the truth. The Pope straightened up for a moment, regaining the dignity of the representative of Christ. From today, he said in a firm voice, I ask you, as you protect my body with your halberds, to also protect the Church with this prayer. Let it become part of your daily duties. It is no less important than physical guarding. Our commander stepped forward with the solemnity characteristic of all Swiss Guard actions, and replied, Holy Father, as we have sworn to defend your life with our own lives, we will also defend the faith with our prayers. What happened next is something I will never forget. Pope Leo XIV raised his hand to bless our halberds. His fingers lightly touched the metal of the weapons in the front row in a gesture reminiscent of the blessing of swords before an ancient battle. May these weapons never have to be used. He spoke softly, but their presence reminds everyone that the Church is not only protected by the children, but also by the divine power represented by the Archangel Michael. I saw his fingers tremble slightly as they touched the cold metal, and a bead of sweat rolled down his forehead despite the coolness of the room. This man is working his butt off on the first day when he could be resting or celebrating. Before leaving, the Pope was a complete rule breaker. He began to walk among the ranks of guards, stopping before a few to ask his name, hometown, and length of service. He stopped before Marcel, the young guard standing to my right. What is your name, son? He asked. Marcel Roth, Your Holiness. The boy replied, his voice trembling. Where are you from, Marcel? From Lerne. Dear Holy Father. And when did you join the Guard? Just 2 months. Dear Holy Father. The Pope smiled warmly, placing his hand on the young man's shoulder, causing Marcel's eyes to widen at the unexpected gesture. So you and I begin this journey together. You as a guard, I as a pope. Both learning, both serving. He leaned closer. Even though he was speaking to Marcel, his voice was clear enough for everyone to hear. And both face a world that doesn't always understand why we do what we do. Your friends probably don't understand why you gave up everything to serve here. My family in America probably doesn't fully understand the burden I'm carrying. But we are not afraid, are we? I saw tears welling up in Marcel's eyes. This moment will surely be engraved in his heart forever. When he came to me, the Pope looked at me with a profound gaze. I noticed the fine lines around his eyes, the marks of a life of service and prayer. And you said, I see you have been here for a long time. 17 years ago, Your Holiness, I responded surprised by this personal attention. So I have witnessed many things. You have protected 2 popes before me. Yes, Your Holiness. So what advice would you give to a pope on his first day? Your question took me completely by surprise. I felt all eyes on me. I never thought a pope would ask my opinion. After a moment of hesitation, I replied sincerely, Your Holiness, put your trust first in God, and then in us, who are here to serve you. The 14th Pope smiled and placed his hand on my shoulder. I felt a slight tremor in his hand, a sign of the physical exhaustion he was experiencing. That was the advice I needed to hear today. Thank you. When the circle between us ended, the Pope returned to the center of the room. His face radiated a new serenity. It was as if this encounter had given him strength. Tomorrow, my pontificate will officially begin, he said. The ceremonies, the audiences, the responsibilities, the whole weight of the church will rest on these frail shoulders. But after being here with you, I feel less alone in this mission. He looked around the room from the seasoned veterans to the youngest guards. I ask you to pray for me as I will pray for you. And let us together each day invoke the protection of Archangel Michael for the church, for the world, and for each of us. His hands, which I had seen trembling earlier, now moved firmly as he hid the cross. Today from the balcony, I said to the world, do not be afraid to proclaim the good news. Do not be afraid to defend eternal values in times of change. Do not be afraid to love unconditionally, but tell the truth. He took a deep breath and his voice rose with conviction that shook the room. To be Catholic today is to be willing to be misunderstood, rejected, even suffered for your beliefs. It is to defend life when a culture glorifies death. It is to defend the family when powerful forces seek to redefine it. It is about sin and redemption when the world wants comfort without responsibility. The whole room held its breath at these words. But it also means loving without limits, serving without conditions, forgiving 70 times 7, while remaining steadfast in the truth but full of mercy. Before leaving, he gave a tired but sincere smile. Francis has taught us to be a church that goes forth. Now it is our turn to go forth without fear, knowing that we do not go alone. The Swiss guards accompany the Pope clearly and firmly. But more importantly, Christ himself is with us, invisible but invincible. As the door closed behind the Pope's white-robed figure, we all stood there for a few more seconds. The silence was solemn, heavy with emotion. Finally, the commander-in-chief gave the order to disperse, but before leaving, he did something unusual. Let us recite together the prayer that the Holy Father had just taught us. And so, as one body, the entire Swiss Guard recited the prayer to Archangel M. The voices of young and old blended together to form a promise of protection that went beyond physical duties.